Welcome back to Wealth Mavericks, the podcast where we help doctors unlock the secrets to building generational wealth. And today we are going to continue our conversation talking about starting to earn a high income. And we want to talk about mindset today and what needs to happen between your ears as you begin enjoying success. How do you make sure that your brain can keep up? Doctors especially, they're so busy working long hours. We talk to a lot who have sacrificed their health and their personal lives for their business, but it is so vitally important to take the time each day for that personal development, that personal growth, so that you're coming from a strong foundation of how you're showing up to your staff, to your patients.
Walking into a doctor's office or even anywhere, and you can see their body language immediately, you know what's going on. And how do you run a business from that standpoint? How do you be a leader from that standpoint? So difficult. Not your fault. No one ever taught you this. I think this is an area that we hear a lot about, but I don't think there's a lot of clarity. And I also think there's a bit of a stigma with this, because typically when you hear about this, it's usually some kind of, big arena with bright lights and people yelling and screaming, walking on fires, swallowing swords, yeah. Right? Yeah. Jumping from the airplane and, oh yeah, I forgot my parachute, but I'm so positive I'm going to land on my feet. Right. Yeah. And that's not the reality. So when did you enter this kind of understanding that, it's not just about what I think I know and what I was raised to know, but that I actually need to improve my knowledge, and where and what focus of that improvement, where'd that start?
For me, it was when I got into direct sales. And you mentioned on a previous episode how that industry in particular has such a deep focus on personal growth and personal development. And I just felt such a strong pull toward this industry through a couple of people. I didn't really know why, but I am so grateful that I got there, because not only did it help deepen my faith and really get me back on a faith journey, but it got me into the world of personal development, and it just expanded my mind to what was possible, not only in business, but for myself personally, when it came to my soul and my body, my fitness, and what was going on between my ears. We're with ourselves all day long. What is that self-talk like? I had never really examined it before. And so much of it is based in our childhood and what we were taught. But what I learned and really have started to put into practice like 10 years ago now, and it's a daily discipline, but like what's going on between your ears, your self-talk is so important. And if we're not constantly, pouring into that and working on that, it can be our downfall, really. And so for me, that's been like a decade-long journey, and it's been so exciting. And when we were talking before, you said that you got on this path far earlier, when you were maybe 18 or 19. And I wish I had that from an earlier age. So what got you started on that path?
Direct sales. It was a marketing organization that was part of the Amway at the time, and then they went into Quickstar when they got into the internet age, so to speak. But it didn't last long, meaning my stint there with direct sales. But what lasted long was the understanding, the realization that I need to work on my between the ears. And when you think about it now, Erin, if you look at people around us, a lot of times when people focus on self-improvement, it is the reason why direct sales focuses on self-improvement, because it's hard. You're having people who have zero experience in something to learn how to do something, and then they have to have an attitude and now a work ethic towards that attitude of doing something that's completely uncomfortable. So it makes a lot of sense that you have that self-improvement kind of avenue or connection with the between the ears aspect of it. But when you also think about people who are focused on direct sales, people who are in sales, self-improvement, they're people in sales. So really, people who are out in the society trying to create relationships, learning how to create relationships, because we don't learn that as kids, right?
Right.
We learn how to make friends based on the things we enjoy in that group of whatever it is, right? So
Mhm.
it could be sports, it could be a certain club, skiing club, it could be a chess club, whatever it is. You have a similar likes, and so you become friends.
Yeah.
But once you leave that world, you're not going to go find other chess clubs around the world. Most people don't do that, right? They get into their professional life, and they start going to their professional life. As business owners, when you think about business owners and a lot of professions, they don't teach this aspect. Self-help, self-improvement, personal improvement is about developing relationships. And the
Mhm.
number one relationship that you have to develop is yourself
Yeah.
first. Knowing who you are. Sounds corny, but knowing who you are. What are your likes? What are you confident about? Because if you don't know, how do you communicate that to somebody else? Right? The law of attraction is a reality that we attract like people. Birds of a feather flock together, we always hear,
Yep.
right? In animal kingdom, there's pride, there's packs, right? There's certain things in the animal kingdom of like. Why? Because they think about, no, they're animals. It's an innate nature
Natural.
thing,
Yeah.
natural, right? Same thing with us. Just because we have the ability to reason doesn't mean that we're different. But if
Mhm.
I don't know who I am, what I am, how do I know what kind of friends and how to communicate with people who don't agree with me and be okay with that? And that's really where a lot of our issues with society are today. People don't know how to communicate because they don't know who they are.
Yeah.
They utilize emotions to try to express things that they feel passionate about, but actually may not be to their core. And how do you communicate to somebody else about that? Great. You love plants and trees and vegetation, and you may want to see the environment to be better. Great. How do you communicate that without having the passion, but be able to understand who you are and express why you think this is important and why that should be important to me to think about?
Hmm.
Right. And so that's kind of where I saw it. And it's kind of developed over the years, of course. But how about yourself?
Yeah. Well, I think so much of it comes from your parents and they just do the best they can with what they have. And I think as an adult, then we can look back and be like, man, I wish my parents would have been this or taught me that. But it's like part of the process of growing up is kind of forgiving your parents and honoring them for, doing the best they could, just like we now as parents are doing the best we can. And hopefully our kids will do even better. But I think we do have to get to that place ourselves. And I think a lot of people don't. Like I've come across people in my real life who are like, oh, you're reading a personal development book again, or why are you into that? And it's like, why aren't you? And
Yeah.
I think the first part that you said is so important of like knowing who you are and just being confident because that's how you show up in the world.
Mhm.
But then it goes beyond that to how are you impacting the world around you, and it starts with the work you've done on yourself. And so I talk to a lot of doctors in my work and I know a few in my personal life as well. And you can tell within a few seconds with someone how they show up in the world. If they're confident, if they're warm, if they're empathetic, or if they're a little bit insecure, a little bit standoffish. And how you show up is going to impact your patients and your staff and your ability to keep those patients and that staff. And if you're going to start a business too, like if you're going to be successful. So, doctors especially, that so busy working long hours doing research, we talk to a lot who have sacrificed their health and their personal lives for their business. But it is just so vitally important to take the time each day for that personal development, that personal growth, so that you're coming from a strong foundation of how you're showing up in your day to your staff, to your patients. So I would ask, like, for people, especially like doctors, business owners, they're so busy. Like, what are some ways that they can begin incorporating this into their lives in just the small pockets of time they have?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question because I today more than when you and I first started, we had at the time cassette tapes. Remember those little things? Or
Well, you're a little older than me, Bob.
yeah.
Just a
Whoa,
little.
whoa, whoa, whoa! I didn't say 8 tracks, but we had a side A and a side B, right? And so, but I think there's a lot of time we spend in the car, and we have access to podcasts now, right? And we have it at their fingertips instantaneously. And there's good stuff and there's bad stuff. But I think also understanding the stigma of what are we talking about with self-improvement and knowing yourself? Are we talking about having a fake smile, walking around, someone yells and screams at you and go, oh, thank you, dude. Tell me I'm a jack, you know what, again. Yay, I'm a jack, you know what. No, right? But so many people think it's that way. I'm positive.
Totally.
It
It's like
is,
toxic positivity, they call it.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, it is toxic.
happy
Yeah,
all the time. Well, no, you're still having a human experience, but how can you do it better?
exactly. And so can you have a bad day or you have a bad moment? What tools or what have you taught yourself to be able to address that? This is what psychologists do and counselors. People go see psychologists and counselors. They learn tools to help people get out of it. But I think we actually can learn those tools in a more effective and efficient way on our own, right?
Mhm.
Now, don't get me wrong. There is a need and a reason for that, right? Some people just need to have another person to communicate with. So I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm
Yeah.
just saying, so I think in our car podcast, which podcast? I don't know. I would probably just say, ones that maybe those that loop quotes, good quotes from business people or other people, right? Everyone has a sound bite, and we all react to it differently. It's not telling you how to be what you need to be. It's just oh, that's a good way of saying that. Huh.
Mhm.
Um, also in this environment, help me become better in my profession, not in the communication part, but the understanding of the research, the passion of learning, the desire to learn, which helped also in my spiritual life, right? That need or desire to feed myself. I'm hungry and I'm starving and I want information. And because I see the results of that information, just like I see the results of eating or exercise or anything else that we're doing, right?
Mhm.
And so I think, I'm Catholic. And so some of the people who write books and do public speaking or in the different Catholic forums and stuff. One of the gentlemen said, we have an area in the chapel called the Adoration Chapel, and where we believe that the Jesus is present in there, and it's quiet. It's always open. Most Catholic churches you go around to, you can go walk right in and you just go sit there. And it's a quiet space. It's a safe space. I always recommend people go do that, whether they're Catholic or not. We all need a quiet space where we don't feel or hear the noise, right? And so for that gentleman, he said 5 minutes a day, 5 minutes a week, just on Thursday when you leave work, go there, spend 5 minutes, go home.
Mhm.
And then after you've done that for a little bit, you realize, wow, I actually stayed 15 minutes or whatever, right? Now
Yeah.
I'm doing it daily because you're getting fed. Go read a book while you're there. Why not? It's a quiet space, right? It's a safe space.
And I think it's planning in advance how to take advantage of those small little times too. Like every little decision you make, like you have 10 minutes between patients and you can choose to go sit in the cafeteria or the break room, or you can choose to walk out the doors and breathe a little bit of fresh air and get a 5-minute
Walk
walk
around
in.
the hospital.
Yeah. What is going to serve you better? I mean, even just stopping to take a deep breath. For me, I think it's so important. So often people, and this is what I did for years, like even like before I had kids, and I would get up the moment I had to get in the shower and just go into my day. Well, now it's like, no, build that time and set your alarm for earlier, even if it's 10 minutes where you can go sit or step outside or, and whether it's say a prayer or read for a few pages or just sit and breathe. My husband and I are very different in this. Like, I feel like morning is sacred and I want to set the foundation for my day. And he will like get up and pour his coffee and look right on his phone. And I'm like, Dave, have you filled your cup yet? And he's like, he'll joke all the time. Yeah, my cup is full of coffee. I was like, no. And it's so cliche, but you cannot pour from an empty cup. So you have to find those ways to pour into yourself.
Yeah.
during the day.
Yeah. And I think sometimes too, especially with men, and I'm a man, so I'm going to speak from my perspective, that when you're if you have a spouse, like we've been blessed to where my wife was able to stay home with the kids, we made sacrifices as a family to allow that to happen because we felt that that was really important.
Yeah.
Okay. Doesn't mean it's more important than what other people decisions they've made. I'm just saying for us and our family, that was important. So when I would leave the office for the day, I'd feel guilty that I've been away all day. My wife's been with the kids all day and she needs a break. She needs a reprieve. I need to put on my daddy hat, my husband hat, and I need to go and dive in. Right.
Yeah.
But how do you go from your 6 to 8 hour, 9 hour, 10 hour day to your point, starting the morning, right? It's very sacred. Fill your cup. How do I go from that? Whatever issues, good or bad, happened in my day, I'm bringing home.
Yeah.
And I'm not ready. I don't have the mindset. So for me, it was my drive time to the office. I used to work in downtown LA. We lived in Orange County. So it was always, I never saw the traffic as being a headache or being bad or would make me angry. It was what it was. I had no control over it. So I embraced it. And that was my time to get mentally positioned to where I can now enter the house and be daddy and be husband. Right now I'm a lot closer. So there is a church that is on my way and I just text my wife and say, Sarah, I'm going to swing by Adoration Chapel. She knows what. So the point I'm bringing up is as long as you communicate what that is to your spouse and you say, I'm doing this so I can download all the day's issues, good or bad, get me in a mindset and a position to where I can walk in the door at home and be ready and fresh for you. Tell me a spouse who would say, don't do that.
Right.
Right? No, your kids want you to be irritable. Yeah.
Yeah.
They want you to snap at them. And yeah, they really want that. I think that really builds their self-esteem and that just brings such joy to them, right? Sarcasm, of course. So it's just the communication.
Yeah, that's really good. And I think it's so important to take that extreme ownership and personal responsibility for how you're showing up, how you are coming home, how you are, at work. It's like, oh, I had a bad day, or I'm just an irritable person. Like that's such a fixed mindset of like, well, this is just how I am, or the circumstances have made me be this way. No, you are completely responsible for your attitude and what is coming out of your mouth. And if you're like, if I think sometimes like about hovering above and witnessing this situation, like, am I proud of who I'm being right now? And if you're not, and if it's a consistent problem, whether it's anger or irritability or whatever it is, you're probably not getting enough sleep. You're probably under too much stress. You're probably trying to pour from an empty cup. So don't just accept it. Like, okay, put a plan in place. That's what we've been talking about, having a plan and do something about it so that you can start showing up better.
Yeah, no, and it's interesting. So I'm gonna do something here, and I'm gonna share my screen just so if you are watching this, and you're in a position to watch it, then feel free to look. If you're driving or whatever, please don't look at this. I'm gonna share my screen, and all I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna share the list of books. I started putting my books that I've read over the years together. And in it is none of these are my faith-based books. These are all books about business and focusing on business. There's 12 pages of books. Now, this is encompassing over 20 years. I am 48. This is 30 years of information that I have poured into me from a book perspective to fill me up for who I am in my professional life. Right. Wow. So that knowledge is extremely powerful to me, and it helps me understand who I am. And so I've done the same thing in my faith life. I've done the same thing in my self-development, and all three have connected me to be who Bob Wolf is. Does that make me perfect? Of course not. Actually, just the opposite. I actually get down on myself more and I hold myself accountable to a higher level because I have spent 30 years knowing this. So it is a slippery slope to when you get to this point to where not beating yourself up when you don't do something you know you should have done. which is the
Hmm.
whole point of why you need to have that understanding of self, right? What's the tool to get out of that hole, so to speak? What's the tool to get my mindset in a better way to where I can be productive and move forward that next minute?
I love that. Because I think we fall into that and we talk about that on here. Like when we talk about dumb doctor deals, like we're talking about finance a lot, and we will talk to people who will just beat themselves up for mistakes they've made in the past. But it's like when we know better, we can do better. And that is so appropriate for this conversation today. Like you've come as far as you are, you're who you are today, but there is always, it's a lifelong journey. There is always room for improvement. So, and
Yeah.
that's what I love about it. I think it's so exciting.
Yeah. And it is exciting because it becomes your new hobby. Right.
Totally.
So if your body breaks down, like I don't play sports anymore. I've got to a point where my age wise, and I was the breadwinner. So the last thing I want to do is get hurt because I'm playing a sport and now I can't go on appointments or meetings, and it affects my family life. So
Yeah.
I made that personal decision based on I knowing who I am. But even when you look at all this stuff and you try to go through this, and when you talk to people and you use your knowledge and you have these conversations, you've been on calls with Joe and I, and you see how people react to the information that we share. It's because
Mhm.
we've built this treasure trove of information that allows us to speak to somebody what they have been trying to put in words, but haven't. They don't know how to, but when we speak to them, they're like, oh, that's exactly what, wow, right? And it creates this almost this instantaneous connection. And the reason for that is because I've spent 30 years pouring in between my ears. It's why I don't have hair. There was no room for hair anymore.
Yeah.
But so it's funny because when I have people go, oh, can you give me a recommendation to a book? How about my book that is a list of books,
Yeah.
right?
That is,
It's
yeah.
hard.
That's amazing though. That is so valuable. And I think I can imagine some people hearing this and being like, well, I haven't really done that. I haven't had time to do that. But it's like, well, yeah, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, but the next best time is today.
Today. Yep.
You
Five
can
minutes
start
today.
today. Yeah.
Yep. Five
And
minutes.
I've had that experience so many times too, because, I'm about a decade in of really pouring into this, and I will be having coffee with a friend or I'll be on a meeting and I'll say something, and the person, like you just said, they'll say, wow, I never thought of it that way. Or you said that. So, I never, and I'm like, wow, where did that come from? Oh, it comes from developing yourself and that knowledge. And it's just, again, it helps you show up better in the world. And I think the more of us showing up at our full capacity in the world just makes the world a better place, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that Joe says that I love, and, I having the opportunity to spend more time with Joe since joining us has been fun. One of the things he says all the time is it's okay to get stuck. It's not okay to stay stuck.
Yeah.
Right. And I used something similar the other day, yesterday, in fact, I was on a podcast for one of our clients, and we were talking about something a little bit similar. And I said, it's sometimes when you fall, that's not the problem. It's how you get up that is the victory.
Yes.
Right. And this was something I have read in like probably 30 books, right? It to me, it's now common knowledge because I've heard it so many different times, but this was the first time she had heard that. Right. And she's in her 40s.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, so I take for granted the
Yep.
information that I have been able to absorb purposely, but I
Mhm.
do take it for granted because it's so intertwined in who I am and me knowing who Bob Wolf is. And I think that's the confidence that we have. And you made that point of walking into a doctor's office or even anywhere, and you can see their body language immediately, what's going on.
Absolutely.
Right. And how do you run a business from that standpoint? How do you be a leader from that standpoint? So difficult. Not your fault. No one ever taught you this. No one's that, which is why we're talking about this, why it's so important to understand that this is a part of it. And to your point, plant a tree today, 5 minutes a day. That's it. 5 minutes a day. Communicate to your spouse. I'm going to do this on a daily basis at this time so I can be present to you and the kids, right? And just have that conversation, see their reaction.
Mm-hmm.
right? That's also in that action of communicating builds a confidence that they are supporting you. They want you to do that. Now, if they don't support that, well, then yeah, you probably have some other issues. Just kidding.
Yeah.
Just kidding. But anyway, so I know this episode's a little bit longer than some of the others, but I think this information, and I know Erin agrees as well, is that this is so important because this is what leads to those goals we were talking about in previous episodes. That courage, that encouragement, that discipline, that excitement, that momentum to achieve your goals is in each of these little 5 minutes.
I love hearing about how it's such a huge part of your life because it's such a big part of my life. And, Joe's not here today, but he is just a wealth of that kind of knowledge, and just being around that kind of person, it just fills you up and makes you excited. And so I think trying to be a person like that as a noble goal. But I love that it's so a part of us. And I think it would be cool to put together, if someone doesn't even know where to start, like, I mean, Bob, we don't necessarily need to share your entire book of books, but maybe your top 10. And then Joe and I could do that too. And we could put it on our website or on social media. Like, here's where to start. Here's some of our favorite podcasts. I think it's something we could keep talking about.
Well, I'll throw out 2 right now.
Okay.
And then if you have 2 top of mind, you throw out 2. So then that's 4. Okay. So for those of you that need a calculator or a smartphone to do that math. Okay. All right. One of the best ones for relationship building I felt was how to, oh geez, I just went blank. Dale Carnegie,
Rewind the tape.
How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
It is a classic. That one and Think and Grow Rich are side by side. But I think just from a personal perspective of how to communicate to people, how to win friends and influence people. Sounds silly, but it is a classic. Love that book. The other one most recently that I liked as a foundational book of understanding money from a very simplistic purpose and a story purpose is Robert Kiyosaki's book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Okay.
Classic.
Those are 2 books that I think are ideal for someone to start off in their easy reads. Robert Kiyosaki's a storyline. How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie is broken up into sections. It's very easy to break it down into sections. You can listen to it in the car and you're not going to miss a beat. Right. So there's no details, there's no charts, there's nothing that you need to look at a book per se, but you can auditorially accept it into your mind. So anyway, so those are my 2.
I love it. I have How to Win Friends and Influence People right here.
Perfect.
This is the one I'm going to recommend. It's one of the first personal development books I ever read, and it's still in my top 3. The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy. It just makes this, it's like the compound effect in money. We know how that works. Yes. Well, it's the same with your life and your daily disciplines and even your thoughts, like little things add up over time. And for me, I've talked a lot this year about how I did 75 hard, and Andy Frisella is not for everybody. He swears a lot and he's just kind of hard. And it's so different than a lot of like the spiritual and nice things that I read and listen to. But once in a while, he just gives you a good kick in the butt. And he wrote the book, the book on mental toughness. He created the 75 Hard Challenge. And I love that kind of stuff. So he has a podcast you can just look up Andy Frisella. Those would be my 2 recommendations, but I think, I know Joe would have a lot of good ones and we can put together a list, but that's a good start. So
yeah. And maybe we do an episode of just giving, different books and different things that we have gone through the years that have, how they have touched us, because there's a handful of most recently that I've passed on to my kids, to you as well. And different people that, I'm reading Darren Hardy's most recent book, the entrepreneurial roller coaster.
Yeah.
And about halfway through that. And so you start kind of getting into this process. And so maybe our next episode we'll wait for Joe, and the three of us will just grab, maybe our 5 to 6 top, and we'll just go through and say, here's why we like this. We won't go through a whole report, but what it meant to us.
Yeah.
Maybe there'll be a connection with some of our listeners of why maybe this makes sense for them.
For sure. Well, I loved this conversation today. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
I look forward to continuing it. And my encouragement to everyone listening is to just start pouring into yourself and what's going on behind your ears, because it so deeply impacts how you show up in your day and in your life. And that's just really important. So until next time, go be a wealth maverick. Thanks for joining us.